Hey guys, Keys here, back with another Bitcoin video. It's January 1st, 2024, so Happy New Year's everyone. And in this video, I wanted to talk about my outlook for Bitcoin in 2024. I think there's a lot of good things happening for Bitcoin in 2024, a lot of bullish things, and I think it's actually going to be a really great year in the markets. But that doesn't mean it's going to be like completely linear, like we're not just going to go up only. I do think we might have some really big pullbacks, but it's January 1st right now, and I think when it's December 2024 and we look back on the year, I do think we'll be up. So we're currently sitting at around 43.6. So I think we'll be higher than 43.6 at the end of the year. I think we might be much higher, honestly. But yeah, there's a lot of things that are happening, and we're going to talk about them all. So this might be kind of a long video. But I just want to give my outlook on Bitcoin, and I guess like at the end of the year maybe come back to it and then just see like how well we did on these predictions. So first I just want to talk about where Bitcoin's doing right now. The last video I made, we were right here. We were like in one of these candles here. We just made it to 43.6. So we were actually like at the price level we're at right now. And this was back in the beginning of December, like the first week of December. So Bitcoin kind of just went sideways, and that's what I was saying might happen because we just hit this area. If we zoom out a little bit, you can see this area has definitely been an area that Bitcoin's reversed off of before, and it wasn't going to be easy getting through it like right away. I didn't really think we were going to slice through it. And one way that we can reset the market actually is just going sideways, right? So we came up here and we couldn't really do anything initially. We did dump down. Bitcoin was able to hold, right? And we kind of just went sideways, and we're almost a month later and we're sitting at the same price. And this is completely okay to reset the market. If Bitcoin does have another leg to go higher, then I completely think this is okay. And you can kind of see I drew this wedge that we've been in, and maybe we're going to be breaking out of it soon. We're at the top again. We were at the bottom like just literally 3 days ago. Now we're at the top. So maybe we come back down and try it again. Or maybe like over the next few days we're just going to break up. And I do think that it could actually happen the next few days because of the ETF news. And we're going to talk about a couple things that are going to happen. So what do we have going on this year? We've got the ETF news in January. We got rate cuts probably coming up in March. We got the Bitcoin halving in April. And then we just got like post-halving Bitcoin, like post-halving price action after April. So like basically May, because the halving is April like 25th or something, so like the end of April. So we're going to go through all of this, and this is kind of like going to guide us on my outlook on what's going to happen with Bitcoin just based off of these things. So let's start with the ETF news. So Bitcoin's ETF news, that's the first thing this year that I think is important to talk about for Bitcoin. It's supposedly, according to the news, it's gonna drop any day from January 5th to January 10th. So anywhere on these lines or in between is the day that the news is gonna hit. And these are the daily candles. So, minimum we got 4 days, maximum we got 9 days. So let's just say an average of about a week away. That's really soon. And in the last video, I was saying how I still think Bitcoin can rally going into this ETF news. And I wouldn't honestly be surprised if Bitcoin kind of just went straight up for the next few days. I don't know if it's going to do that, but maybe even kind of similar pattern to this move right here. So let's do a bars pattern. This was from the beginning of December to the 5th of December. Bitcoin kind of rallied. So if we kind of overlay it, yeah, you can kind of see like if Bitcoin did the same move, we'd be sitting at around almost 50K, like 49.8, let's just say around 50K by January 5th. And I completely think that's doable. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I am expecting Bitcoin to rally. I don't know how high going into this news. And today's Monday, so great way to start the week. We're up around 3% right now. And I think it could continue all week until the ETF news. That being said, actually real quick, I just want to show you guys like if you Google ETF news, like what people are saying, like it's going to be wild. Goldman Sachs suddenly joins the Bitcoin ETF, right? Like BlackRock. I don't even know that this is Van Eck, but like there's so many things like people are so bullish right now because of this ETF news. And I said this last time, that kind of makes me a bit scared because it's never that easy. And the ETF news, yeah, it's gonna bring a lot of people in, but that doesn't mean it's gonna bring everyone in like that day, like right away. And I actually tweeted something about the news about a month ago on December 11th. You can see I said the ETF news is less than a month away now. Until then, I think Bitcoin is okay, even if we sell off some more. Once the news drops or the ETF is launched, then I'll be worried. The markets have reversed off news like this before in 2017 and 2021. So this was 2017. CME Group launches Bitcoin futures. You can see it was on this day that it was already red. We were already actually dumping the day before slightly. You can actually see what happened. It launched immediately. 4 days later, Bitcoin dropped 50% or 46.4%. 50 days later from the launch, Bitcoin was down 69.7%. This was in 2017. 2021, Coinbase IPO launched on the NASDAQ. So you could trade the Coinbase stock on the NASDAQ. That's basically what this is. On the day was literally the peak. This was literally the first peak of Bitcoin at 65K or 63K, whatever it was. And we reversed right off of it. 11 days out, we were down 27.4%. 69 days out, we were down 55.7%. So that's why I'm a bit worried, because news like this historically actually has been kind of bearish once it hits. I don't know if it's going to play out like that, but that's just something I'm looking out for. And we'll actually see. It's really soon. So I'm excited to see what happens with Bitcoin over this next week and over this next few weeks, actually, just to see really what it does. But in the short term, like the next few days, I actually do think Bitcoin might rally kind of hard soon if it does. I'd be kind of surprised if it didn't, honestly. Like if we just went flatlined going into it, I would be kind of surprised. So I don't really think we're going to flatline into it. I think we're going to start rallying, but I don't know if that's going to happen, but we'll see really soon. So that's the ETF stuff. And yeah, the next thing after the ETF news is actually the rate cut. So let's talk about the rate cuts. So talking about rate cuts, we need to first talk about the S&P and kind of remind ourselves of what's going on with the S&P, because I do think this does affect Bitcoin. Bitcoin does kind of correlate with the S&P sometimes, but of course sometimes it doesn't. But the thing is, if the S&P gets a move like this, like the COVID move down, or a 2008 stock market crash down, in my opinion, Bitcoin is going to crash. If the S&P takes a massive hit, it's going to roll into crypto as well, which is why we need to take a look at the S&P, because I do think that we could be seeing a crash actually sometime soon with the S&P. So let's just quickly take a look at it. You can actually see the S&P right now. This is the all-time high back in January of 2022, the first week of January of 2022. So literally 2 years ago, we were at this level basically, and we're sitting right underneath it right now. And something that I think I said this back in a video in March, was that I think the S&P is just going to keep rallying until interest rates start to come down, because historically that's what we've seen, which is why I actually drew this pink line. And back then it was saying it was July, but now it's actually in March. So let's move this down to around March 20th. So it's actually this line now, because the markets kind of changed their mind. I'll show you guys in a sec, but basically the markets are saying we're going to get interest rate cuts March 20th of 2024, which is this pink line. And I was saying that I think the S&P, until we get the rate cuts, it's just going to rally up. And so far it's actually been right. I mean, we've kind of just rallied all year. This was October 2022, this low. So 2023 started right here. And we basically went up. We kind of had a pullback right here, but kind of up only in 2023. Which is another kind of scary thing, because the economy in 2023 really wasn't that great. Inflation was pretty high. I just know things just cost so much more these days, but yet the stock market's rallying, right? You can maybe even say it's because of inflation, right? The stock market's more expensive now because inflation, right? But regardless, the S&P's been climbing up, and I think that I need to overlay, let me actually overlay interest rates on this, and let's take a look. So the orange line is the interest rates, and you can kind of see, I've already drawn out these lines from my last video when I talked about them, but let's just go over it real quick. Basically, every time, and I say every time, but every time since 2000, every time we've gotten interest rates going down, so interest rates cuts, that's really when we've seen the stock market kind of take a hit. And you can see 2000, what happened in 2000, interest rates were at around 6.5%, and the market's topped. Let's zoom in a little bit. The market's topped, right, in 2000, right here. Well, I guess it went a little bit higher before, but basically went sideways, and it was basically at its top. And then once we got the rate cuts, we were actually already dropping into it, but once the rate cuts happened, like, we got a really big sell-off, right? Like, this was not a small move by the S&P. This was a 50% drop on the S&P, and that's really big, right? And that happened when rate cuts happened. So we went from 6.5, basically bottomed right before the bottom of it. Like, we had one more cut, but we started going up before it. But basically, interest rates went down to 1.25, from 6.5 to 1.25, and we had a huge sell-off. Then what happened in 2008 or 2007? Kind of the same thing a little bit later. So interest rates were kind of going sideways at around 5.25 here. And what happened right as we got the cut, and this one was like just as it happened, just as we cut, the market's tanked, right? Like, this was actually a huge sell-off. This was 2008. I wasn't like in the stock markets in 08, but I just know people said it was really bad. So definitely one of the biggest crashes in history happened when rate cuts started, right? So this one was even bigger. This was a 57% drop. And we actually didn't stop dropping until rate cuts were at 0. So we went from 5.25 to 0, and that entire time while we were cutting rates, the markets were collapsing until we reached the bottom. And then once we did, like, that's when we started getting a rally again. So let's actually take a look. I mean, this was the COVID drop. You can kind of see this is kind of similar. I mean, it wasn't the peak here because, like, the peak was actually at 2.5, but when COVID hit, we were at 1.75, and then when they cut, this drop corresponded to this cut right here, right? So rate cuts actually usually mean pretty not so great things in the future for the stock market. So what I was saying here, the reason I was saying here that, or I was saying it like sometime in this area, the reason why I was saying sometime in this area that I think we're just going to rally for a while until whenever the rate cuts are, was just based off of this. And so far it's been right? Like, if you did end up, I didn't buy it, but like if you did buy it here, like, you'd still be up an okay amount. So now we're actually sitting currently at 5.5%. And I think this could be the terminal rate. I don't know if it's going to be the terminal rate, but if it is the terminal rate, we've actually been at this for, hold on, make it a bit easier to see. We've actually been here for like kind of a while, since July 23. Yeah, since July, we've been at 5.5, and it's January 1st, 2024. So it's been like 5-6 months now, and we've kind of just been holding it at 5.5. And there's this tool that I go on sometimes to check, because this tool tells you what the market thinks is going to happen. Currently we're at 5.5, right? And if you take a look at this probabilities table, the market is predicting, and by the way, these numbers change, a good amount. Like, at one point, this rate cut, which is the first rate cut, would correspond to this column right here. This number wasn't until like here. It was like 2 months later, like back in April when I like looked at this and made this video. But now it's saying it's in March, so that's better for us because that's just sooner, and might as well just get it over sooner so we can start going up making money. But they do change sometimes. I don't really know how much this is going to change. I think at the worst case scenario, if this number doesn't actually play out, it'll be May. So in my opinion, somewhere between March and May. Hopefully it's in March because it's just sooner. And what this is saying right now is that in January 31st, so the end of this month, there's going to be another meeting. It's going to be keeping it the same level. So if you looked at it on this chart, it would basically mean this line continues to flat line, because that's what the next meeting is saying. But then the 73.5 is saying that we're going to drop by 25 points. So that would kind of correspond to a drop like this. Oh, wait. So basically, kind of like this, right? And if that's going to play out, like maybe we even go sideways a little bit, but like if this is going to be the turning point where the rate cuts start coming down, like I don't know how it's going to look after. You can kind of just look at this table, but regardless, like it really only matters like when we start it. And if this is going to be the start in January, or not January, when was it? March 20th, then I still think we can rally until March 20th. And then once it hits, then like around March 20th, maybe like beginning of April, maybe even before it, that's when we get a sell-off until we come down. And this is saying, I mean, TBH, like these numbers in December 2024, like this is predicting a year out from now, so you cannot take these numbers to the bank, but let's just go with it because that's what we got right now. You know, we'll be 34% chance. The highest probability right now is that we'll be at 3.75. Which is almost 2 points lower. It's like 1.75 points lower than where we are now. So that is kind of a big drop. Basically, it's saying it's going to drop all year, which could be kind of worrisome. Like if it takes all year to drop, then maybe like we crash for a while. I don't really think we would crash for too long, honestly, but my point is March 30th or March 20th of this year could be the turning point for the S&P based off of interest rates. And if the S&P, like we saw in 2008 and 2001, gets a massive sell-off because interest rates are coming down, then I think Bitcoin's going to get a massive sell-off. And we kind of just talked about the interest rates problem, but this is going to go back to Bitcoin now. So, and if we do get a massive sell-off in the S&P in around March, then I think that Bitcoin's just going to get a massive sell-off in March as well. So the thing is, like I said, like maybe in January, what happens instead of Bitcoin collapsing after the ETF news right away, like it could still happen, but maybe that doesn't happen. What if Bitcoin goes up, just gets a minor pullback after it, maybe like 10, 20%, maybe like, let's actually see, let's say we went to 50K, then we retested this. So like a 12% drop, let's say we go to 50K, then retest the top of this range. Something like 12% drop, which that seems doable, right? And then we keep continuing. Because you got to remember, we're also in a halving year, and we're going to talk about that in a sec, but let's say we just continue going up, like doing some random shenanigans, kind of going up, and then March comes. This is not to scale. Like, I'm not saying we're going to be at 60K, but let's just say we're going up. Then March comes, and then we get a huge like sell-off because the S&P is selling off at this time, so Bitcoin starts selling off. And it could be massive. Like, if the S&P gets a 50% sell-off, like, Bitcoin's going to get more than 50%. And what if, from the top, we come all the way back down to this range right here, 30K. 31 to 30K. Anywhere between, basically this box. Because I'm still targeting at some point Bitcoin will retest 30 to 31 just because it was such a pivotal level in the markets and we didn't retest it. When we broke it, like we were not even close. We just went straight up, right? And so I think there is a risk in 2024, in March of 2024 or April, that Bitcoin does actually retest 30K. And it could be that we're just continuously going up and then the S&P gets a huge sell-off because, you know, the economy's just not doing so great and stuff, and the interest rates start coming down, and so Bitcoin starts coming down. So that's kind of my outlook for March right now. I don't know if that's going to play out, but that's my reasons why I think Bitcoin's going to get a sell-off around that time, or it could. Just really depends on the market, but I do think that the S&P, when interest rates do start coming down, I think the S&P might get a sell-off, and that's going to affect Bitcoin. So that's rate cuts in March. Actually, what's really super interesting about that is because if it does happen in March, it would almost be like the stars are aligning perfectly for like the greatest bull run. And that's gonna be so fun if like it actually happens, because we'll just make a lot of money. But why do I say that? It's because of the halving. So let's talk about the halving next. So Bitcoin's halving is probably one of the most bullish things that Bitcoin experiences every 4 years. So basically what happens is that the rewards for Bitcoin get halved. So we're going to go from, this is going to be the fourth halving. So we're going down from 6.25 down to 3.125. Yeah. Whatever, it's half of 6.25. So basically each block is going to reward you with 3.125 Bitcoin, starting from April 22nd. I think that's what it said. Yeah, April 22nd is the fourth halving date. Yeah. So reward down from 6.25 to 3.25. So rewards get halved. And the reason why that's so bullish is because there's just going to be less Bitcoin circulating, because, we're not getting as much Bitcoin. And by the way, Bitcoin does have a maximum supply of 21 million. So we're going to be cutting that in half. And historically speaking, the halving is super, super bullish for Bitcoin. So let's actually take a look at the 3 previous halvings that we've had. The first one is all the way in 2012, back in simpler times. But you can kind of see what happened here in 2012. Bitcoin was actually rallying. When was this? So this was, June of 2012, and this is November of 2012. So this is just a couple months before. I mean, Bitcoin went from $4.80 all the way up to $15.45. That's crazy. Imagine getting Bitcoin up for $4 or even $15. So it went up 218%. And then a couple months before, let's see how long this is actually. So this is 99 days before we had a pretty big drop. But this was actually a huge rally. This dropped to 50%. And then we rallied up again after the drop, another 72%. But then again, this is all before the halving, we dropped 25%. So you can kind of see, and this one's kind of sooner, like we were at the bottom only a month before the halving actually happened. So the halving's in April 22nd. And what's interesting, remember guys, the interest rate cuts start on March 20th, which is actually 1 month before the halving. So interesting time. So in 2012, we basically rallied in the year, kind of had like 2 sell-offs and like 2 rallies, right? Like this sell-off and this sell-off. But I think this one is a little bit more significant because it was a month before the halving, and we still sold off, and then we started rallying into the halving. And then what happened after the halving happened, I mean, this happened, right? And then after the halving, basically if you bought at the bottom of the halving and then you waited, you would have been up 2,664%. So that's 266x with Bitcoin. So basically turning 1K to 266K is what happened in 2012 going into 2013. And so that's what happened in 2012. Let's see what happened in 2016. So the next one happened on July 4th of 2016. And you can kind of see, hold on. And you can kind of see a similar pattern, right? Like Bitcoin was rallying. It rallied really hard right before the halving. What happened? We dumped right before it. Then we kind of rallied into it. And in this case, actually, we dumped after it too. So interesting that, we didn't just take off. Like 2012, we just took off, right? We just went straight up right after. But 2016, we actually dumped down. But the thing is, like, look what happened still after that, right? So basically what happened, like, if you took it from the rally that led us into the halving, like this isn't even the bottom, and you waited like a year and a half, another 2,945%. So that's another 294x on Bitcoin. So turning 1K to 294K is what followed. That wasn't even from the bottom. That was just from, if you take it from the bottom, 4,100%. I mean, this is just insane. Like, it doesn't even seem real sometimes, but that's what happened. So similar pattern, not quite, because like there were some differences, but similar in the beginning. We rallied up, dumped down right before it, rallied into it, but in 2012 we like rallied right after, right? But in this case, you actually had to wait a little bit longer before we got the huge rally, but definitely worth the wait. So yeah, it was just interesting actually that we did dump after. I didn't realize that, but basically this was a 30% drop. So the first one was, I forgot what the first one was. So the first one, oh, 25. 25, the first one. Second one, 30%. Differences after the two, or what happened after. But this was just short term, right? Like, yeah, you might have been down a little bit for about 3 months, but if you just held on to it after the halving, you would have made so much money. So post halving still pretty good. I mean, just the immediate post halving in 2016 wasn't so great, but it basically followed like this massive move. I think anyone would take that. So no complaints from anyone. Then 2020 was the third halving. So this is the most recent halving. What do we do? Same thing. Rallied up a little bit right before the halving. We dumped down. By the way, this was the COVID crash. Regardless of reasons, I don't really care what the reason is, like, because I'm just gonna look at like the charts. But yeah, I guess like some people say like they don't count this because it was COVID, but I still count it. So same behavior, rallied up, huge drop down. Then what we rallied into the halving. This was similar to 2016. We kind of went sideways after the halving for a bit. We didn't really dump down though. Like 2016, we dumped first, right, and then we kind of went sideways. But this went sideways. And then we actually didn't dump. We went up, and then we got the huge move. So what happened? What was the move here? So from the bottom to the top, 1,500%. So 155x. Still, again, massive. This was only 3-4 years ago. So Bitcoin's still able to pull off these crazy moves, which is why the halving is just so important, right? Like after the halving, even if you bought it at the halving, you would have been up 600%. You would have 7x your money. And this was when Bitcoin was already at 9K, okay? And you still 7x'd it from 9K. So that's pretty massive. And you can just see how bullish like post-halving is. Like basically, yeah, you might have to wait like a couple months for it to really kick off, but it's still like you still make a lot of money. And so going to where we are now, so this first purple line is the interest rates cut. It's actually deleted. So this line is the halving date. So what we do tend to see is a sell-off before the halving. So maybe we just rally to the ETF news. Maybe even don't even get a sell-off after the ETF news, which I think could still happen. Let's just say we rally, but then maybe we like get a pullback right before, like maybe like a month before the halving. But if we do get a pullback, which I still think could happen because this actually so far aligns with the interest rates cutting. So let's put the interest rates, this line is the interest rates cutting that we talked about. So what if like we just rallied up to here and then we like dumped really quickly hard down, and then leading up to the rally we started like recovering, right? And then we're going up again. Something like this could also play out. And yeah, I just think that we need to be careful before before April. We could see interest rates cutting, which mess with the stock market, the S&P, which would mess with Bitcoin. That's one risk. And then the other risk is that we just tend to see a sell-off before the halving actually occurs. So there's like two reasons I think that we could be seeing a sell-off coming for Bitcoin in the early parts of 2024. I don't really know which month. If I were to guess, I'd say in March. That's kind of what I think it's going to be so far. And I don't know how far down it's going to go. Oh, by the way, like the halving sell-off, so we had 30%. No, the first year was 25. The second year was 30. The third year was 63. But that was because of COVID, so let's just say like it's a 30% sell-off. Let's say we're at like 50K. I mean, a 30% sell-off from 50K, puts us back at 35. If we came all the way back down to 30, be around a 40% sell-off. I think these numbers is definitely doable. Like, I still think it's possible that Bitcoin revisits 30K again. And even if we like just go straight to like 50, 55K, I don't see why Bitcoin can't just get a huge sell-off down to like 30K, shake everyone out, and then just, you know, do its post-halving thing where it just goes up only after the halving. So that's what I think's kind of my outlook for Bitcoin this year. So, I mean, I can't really say what's going to happen after April. All I can really say what's going to happen after April is, you know, most likely either sideways or up. Even if we go down, in my opinion, 2024 is kind of buy the dip year. In 2023, I was talking a lot about it being kind of just a sideways year, which it was not a sideways year. I mean, Bitcoin went up like 2.5x or whatever. But the halving year, I definitely think is even more bullish and than the pre-halving year, and we're in the halving year now. It's 2024. We've been waiting for 2024 for so long, and I think that by the end of the year, going into 2025, this is what always happens. Like, this is what happened in 2020. It was in May of 2020. Then what happened at the end of the year, like October 2020, we started it, right? It really started to kick off. By the time it was the end of the year, we were all the way up at 20K again. We were at the all-time high when the year ended. And yeah, I mean, I think Bitcoin could actually maybe even be past the all-time high by the end of 2024. So, you know, even just to get to the all-time high right now is a 58% move. So I still think this year probably going to see, by the end of the year, at least at one point, at some point, we'll probably be up towards, you know, the peak, the all-time high. I think it's going to happen in 2024 because that's what happened in 2020. And then what happened in 2016. I mean, 2016 was even like crazier. This happened in November, so time frame's a bit different, but you can see at the end of the year, December, like going into January, like it was basically up only. So yeah, I think that's really my outlook on Bitcoin and my reasons why I think they're going to play out that way. I don't know if it's going to play out that way. If I had a crystal ball, then I'd already be a billionaire. But that's just what I think. We're going to revisit these things as they come. Like, when the ETF news hits, I'm definitely making a video. Around March, we're going to be talking. I'm going to be making videos a lot, but like when these like events are coming up, I'll definitely like focus on those events and like we'll see what Bitcoin does. But that's what I think is going to happen. So just to sum it up, really, ETF news bullish. Two ways. I guess there's always two ways, but if we do get a sell-off after the ETF news, that's nothing to really be worried about. Like I said, I think we're in the buy the dip year, like mode this year. So if we get a sell-off after the ETF news, buying it, in my opinion, would be fine. Then maybe we can continue rallying into March, like with the S&P. Then maybe the S&P gets a huge sell-off and Bitcoin gets a huge sell-off, which also corresponds to right before the halving, which is what we saw. And then going into the halving, Bitcoin just eats up that loss. So you want to buy the dip in March if it happens. And then just hold. Honestly, just hold until the end of the year. So yeah, guys, that's Bitcoin Outlook 2024. Thanks for watching, guys, and Happy New Year's.